She called 911 every time. When her first husband died, when her second husband died, when her daughter stopped breathing. Each time, Stacey Castor played the devastated widow, the grieving mother, the unlucky woman surrounded by tragedy. But behind the tears was a pattern. In January 2000, Michael Wallace died suddenly after weeks of unexplained illness. No autopsy was performed. 5 years later, David Castor was found dead in his bedroom from antifreeze poisoning. His will had been altered. His son had been erased. An investigation began connecting the dots. Stacey made a chilling decision. She attempted to poison her own daughter, Ashley, and planted a fake suicide confession framing her for both murders. She almost got away with it. What ultimately exposed her wasn't a dramatic confession or a hidden witness. It was a single repeated word in a forged suicide note, a linguistic fingerprint. In this episode of Deadly Intent, we examine the psychology of escalation, the performance of grief as cover, and the moment when a carefully constructed mask begins to crack. This isn't just a story about poison. It's about self-preservation, manipulation, and how criminals unravel when the pressure closes in. Because the crime is never the whole story, the intent always is. She called 911 herself. That's the detail that haunts this case. Not that she poisoned 2 men with antifreeze, not that she almost killed her own daughter, not that she forged a will or wrote a fake suicide confession from her child's computer while that child sat in a college classroom. No, what haunts this case is that every single time someone was dying in her home, Stacey Castor picked up the phone and called for help herself. She reported her first husband's death. She reported her second husband's death. She called 911 when her daughter stopped breathing. And each time, she cried. She performed. She was the devastated widow, the grieving mother, the unlucky woman who couldn't catch a break. She almost got away with it. Almost. I'm Carmen Carrion, and this is Deadly Intent, where we dig past the crime scene and into the mind behind it, because understanding why someone does the unthinkable is the only way we ever see it coming. Intent. It's what separates accident from murder, passion from premeditation, justice from revenge. Today we're talking about Stacey Castor, a woman who killed her husbands, poisoned her daughter, framed her own child for double murder, and left one single linguistic fingerprint that brought the whole thing crashing down. She didn't call it antifreeze, she called it antifree. Michael Wallace was 38 years old when he died on January 11, 2000. He was Stacey's first husband and the father of her 2 daughters, Ashley and Bree. He worked as a mechanic. Stacey worked as an ambulance dispatcher. On paper, it looked like an ordinary working-class life in upstate New York. Their marriage was not smooth. Friends and family later described financial strain, and by the end, what appeared to be a deteriorating relationship. A former friend told ABC News that Stacey had been contemplating divorce in the months before Michael got sick. Michael had a complicated history with alcohol. He had done time in prison for repeated DUI offenses. But his family loved him. His sister remembered him as genuinely warm, and she was suspicious the moment he died. She asked for an autopsy. She was insistent about it. Stacey told her no. She said she trusted the doctors. She said there was no need. Michael was buried without an autopsy, without toxicology, without a second look. He had been sick for weeks before he died, coughing, unsteady on his feet, visibly swollen. His family encouraged him to seek medical care. His doctor, who examined him once, noted what might be an inner ear disorder. Weeks later, Michael was found unresponsive on the couch at home and was pronounced dead at the hospital. A grown man with no cardiac history, dead on his couch, no autopsy performed. His heart, investigators would later confirm, had been in perfect condition. David Castor, second victim. David Castor was 48 years old when he died on August 22, 2005. He had built something for himself. He owned Liverpool Heating and Air Conditioning, a successful HVAC business where Stacey served as his office manager after they married in 2003. He was an outdoorsman, a hunter, a man who kept a shotgun under his bed. He had a son from his first marriage, David Castor Jr. His ex-wife, Janice Pushon Farmer, described him as strong-willed and grounded. His sister, Linda Horzimpa, said he was a man who knew exactly what antifreeze did to the human body. He worked around it. He understood it intimately. A man like that does not choose antifreeze as a method of self-destruction. There were tensions in the marriage over money, arguments about how David spent it, about financial control, and there was the matter of his will, a will that investigators would discover Stacey had altered to ensure that everything went to her and her daughters from her first marriage, and nothing, not a single dollar, went to David's son. David Castor Jr. found out about his disinheritance at his father's funeral. Stacey Castor lived in Liverpool, New York, a quiet suburb of Syracuse in Onondaga County. Her crimes unfolded across two counties, Onondaga, where David was killed, and neighboring Cayuga County, where Michael was buried. That geographic divide briefly complicated the investigation, but eventually, what was buried in Cayuga County came back up, literally. In the fall and winter of 1999, Michael Wallace began feeling wrong. He described it to his doctor as feeling drunk, dizzy, disoriented, off balance, even when he hadn't been drinking. His physician thought it might be an inner ear problem. It wasn't. Feeling intoxicated without consuming alcohol is a classic early symptom of ethylene glycol poisoning. Ethylene glycol is the primary toxic compound in antifreeze. As it metabolizes in the body, it produces calcium oxalate crystals that deposit primarily in the kidneys. In the early stages, it causes a state that closely resembles intoxication. As the poisoning progresses, it causes organ failure, seizures, coma, and death. Over the holiday season of 1999, Michael's family noticed he was deteriorating. He was coughing, unsteady, visibly swollen. His family begged him to get medical help. He died before he could. On January 11, 2000, Michael Wallace was found unresponsive on the couch and pronounced dead at the hospital. He was 38 years old. His physician attributed the death to a heart attack. Stacey refused an autopsy on his behalf. Michael was buried in the Owasco Rural Cemetery in Cayuga County. Stacey collected on his life insurance policy and moved on with her life. She would later request that when David Castor died, he be buried right next to Michael, side by side, in a plot she owned. A headstone for Michael Wallace still reads, "Together forever." There is a space on it reserved for Stacey. August 2005. It was Labor Day weekend, near their second wedding anniversary. Stacey told investigators she and David had gotten into a fight about how to celebrate. She said he became upset, started drinking heavily, and locked himself in their bedroom. She said she was scared. She said she thought he might hurt himself. On the afternoon of August 22, 2005, she called 911. When Onondaga County Sheriff Sergeant Robert Willoughby broke down the locked bedroom door, he found David Castor's naked body face down in the bed, lying in vomit. On the nightstand, a bottle of apricot brandy, a glass with remnants of orange juice, a glass containing a green liquid, and a cranberry juice bottle. On the floor beneath the bed, a jug of antifreeze. There was no suicide note. When Willoughby told Stacey that David was not okay, she began screaming, "Have him come back. He's not dead. He's not dead." Sergeant John Chietsky initially assessed it as a simple suicide by antifreeze poisoning. The county medical examiner confirmed the cause of death as ethylene glycol poisoning, but Detective Dominic Spinelli of the Onondaga County Sheriff's Department wasn't satisfied. Several things were wrong. There was no suicide note. David kept a shotgun under the bed. A man who wanted to die quickly would not choose a 72-hour poisoning death. David was a mechanic. He knew antifreeze. He understood, professionally, what drinking it would do to him. His sister said flatly, there was no way he would have chosen it. And then there was the physical evidence. Stacey's fingerprints were on the glass of antifreeze on the nightstand, in a way investigators found deeply troubling. The placement of those prints, Spinelli noted, was consistent with someone holding the glass from the bottom, as if raising it to another person's lips. In the kitchen trash, investigators found a turkey baster. It contained both traces of ethylene glycol and David Castor's DNA. The working theory, Stacey had used the baster to force-feed the antifreeze into David once he became too physically weak to resist. Then she staged the scene. The brandy, the glasses, the jug on the floor, to read as a depressed man who drank himself to death. During a follow-up interview, Spinelli noticed Stacey's eyes land on a photograph in his folder. A photo of the turkey baster. What is that? She asked. That picture. What is that picture of a turkey baster? Why is that there? Spinelli told her not to worry about it. The interview was over, but the question told him everything. While building the case against Stacey for David's death, investigators discovered something that clarified her financial motive in stark terms. David Castor's will had been altered. The document left his entire estate, valued at approximately $300,000, including his business and life insurance, to Stacey Castor and her 2 daughters from her first marriage. David's son from his previous marriage, David Castor Jr., was not mentioned anywhere in the will. Not a dollar. David Jr. found this out at his father's funeral. He told investigators, "He didn't even mention my name." Forensic examination of the will determined it had been forged. The document was not what David had originally signed. Prosecutors argued Stacey had altered it to ensure she received everything. This would become the 3rd count in her eventual indictment, charged not simply as forgery, but as offering a false instrument for filing in the 1st degree. David Jr. spent years after Stacey's conviction fighting to have his father's remains moved out of the cemetery plot Stacey owned, the same plot where Michael Wallace was also buried. The plot that still bears the inscription, "Together Forever," with a space reserved for Stacey. He called it Stacey's Shrine of Evil. After Stacey died in 2016, a court granted him permission to move his father's remains to a cemetery in Cicero and to destroy the shared headstone. David's ex-wife, Janice Poisson Farmer, contacted investigators almost immediately after his death. She told Spinelli, "There is no way he would have committed suicide. That is so wrong, so very wrong." 3 months after David's death, Spinelli reached out to investigators in Cayuga County to ask about Michael Wallace's death in 2000. When he pulled Michael's medical records, he found the pre-death symptom of feeling intoxicated without drinking alcohol. He recognized it immediately. At David's funeral, Spinelli had noticed something else. David's grave was being placed directly next to Michael Wallace's, at Stacey's specific request. David's brother-in-law, Jonathan Corbett, put it grimly, "You've got Mike on the far right, David on the far left." I said, "What's she doing? Starting a collection up there?" Investigators also monitored whether Stacey ever visited the graves. She never did, not once. A widow who never visits her husband's grave, a mother who placed him there. By 2007, investigators had enough to seek a court order for exhumation. They moved carefully, covertly tracking Stacey's movements and monitoring her phone to ensure she didn't learn what was coming. In September 2007, Michael Wallace's casket was removed from the ground and transported by ambulance to the medical examiner's office. The findings were definitive. Michael's body contained calcium oxalate crystals, the signature post-mortem marker of ethylene glycol poisoning. Toxicology confirmed it. Michael Wallace had not died of a heart attack. He had been poisoned. His death was ruled a homicide. Investigators now had 2 confirmed antifreeze poisonings, both benefiting the same woman, both occurring in marriages that appeared to be failing. They tapped Stacey's phones and waited. September 2007. On Ashley Wallace's first day of college, 2 investigators arrived at her school. They told her that her father, Michael Wallace, had been murdered, that his death had been a homicide, that he was poisoned with antifreeze. Ashley was 19 years old. She had just started college. Her father had died when she was 12. She had spent 7 years believing it was a heart attack. She called her mother. Police were listening to every word. On the recorded wiretap, Stacey could be heard carefully extracting information from Ashley, what the investigators had said, how much they seemed to know, exactly what they had told her. Then, warmly, they'd had a hard week. Why didn't Ashley come over? They could have a drink together. Ashley agreed. Stacey was not just her mother. She was, Ashley later testified, her best friend. Police set up cameras outside Stacey's house. Ashley arrived. They drank together. Ashley left with what she thought was a hangover. She went to school the next day. On September 13th, 2007, Ashley returned to her mother's house. Stacey offered her another drink. Ashley described it as tasting nasty, but drank it because she trusted her mother completely. Over many hours, Stacey Castor fed her daughter a toxic combination of vodka and prescription pills, using a teaspoon to administer it while Ashley drifted in and out of consciousness, the same methodical, patient approach that had killed 2 men. The following morning, Ashley's younger sister Bree found Ashley unresponsive in bed. Bree demanded Stacey call for help. Stacey made the 911 call. As paramedics arrived and rushed Ashley to the hospital, Stacey handed them a piece of paper she had found on the floor beside Ashley's bed, a 750-word typed letter, signed in Ashley's name, a suicide note confessing to the poisoning deaths of both Michael Wallace and David Castor. The note said, "Now everyone is going to know what really happened, and they know it wasn't you, it was me. Please don't hate me. Remember, I love you." Medical staff worked furiously on Ashley. She had potentially lethal levels of painkillers in her system. Doctors later said that if she had arrived even minutes later, she would not have survived. She was taken for emergency dialysis. She lived, and while she was still unconscious, investigators looked closely at that note. The word antifreeze was misspelled, not once, 4 times. Every instance read antifree without the Z. Detective Spinelli stopped. He remembered something from his earlier interview with Stacey Castor. She had used the exact word, antifree, during their conversation. He had noted it at the time as a minor verbal tic. Now he was looking at the same misspelling, repeated throughout, in a note her daughter had supposedly written. Investigators pulled Ashley's computer. The letter wasn't there. They pulled Stacey's home computer. The letter was there, and so were 2 earlier drafts, showing revisions, edits, refinements. The metadata confirmed the timing. Stacey had written and revised the fake suicide confession while Ashley was at school on the day of the second drink. Stacey Castor was arrested at the hospital while sitting at her daughter's bedside. Here's what makes Stacey Castor's psychology so particular and so revealing. She didn't begin by trying to frame her daughter. That came later, much later. It was a desperate improvisation born from a very specific moment, the moment Stacey realized investigators weren't going away. This is the core psychological truth of this case. The killing of Michael Wallace was, at its root, a calculated crime of financial opportunity. She wanted out of the marriage. She wanted the insurance money. She didn't want the inconvenience of a divorce, the financial split, the disruption. The killing of David Castor followed the same logic. A souring marriage, conflict over money, a $300,000 estate she had quietly altered a will to claim. The same cold calculation that poisoning, stage as accident or despair, was cleaner and more profitable than the legal alternative. These were crimes of acquisition, planned, patient, methodical. But then the investigation came, and that changed everything. Intent. It's what separates accident from murder, passion from premeditation, justice from revenge. The attempt on Ashley's life was not greed. It was not anger. It was not the same motive that killed Michael and David. It was self-preservation. Pure, animal-cornered self-preservation. When Stacey Castor heard that investigators had exhumed Michael Wallace's body, something shifted in her psychology. She had successfully navigated 7 years of suspicion. She had performed grief flawlessly. Twice, she had positioned herself as a woman unlucky in love, not dangerous. And suddenly that entire performance was at risk of collapse. Criminal psychologists call this pattern escalation commitment, the tendency of certain offenders to solve the problems created by their crimes by committing additional crimes. Rather than retreating, cutting losses, or simply fleeing, they double down. They identify the new threat and design a new solution. For Stacey Castor, the solution to being investigated for 2 murders was to create a third victim and redirect all evidence toward her. What's psychologically remarkable is the target she chose, her own daughter. Ashley was simultaneously the most convenient scapegoat available and the person who trusted Stacey most in the world. She was the biological daughter of Michael Wallace. She had theoretical motive in the narrative Stacey was constructing, a troubled young woman haunted by guilt who had poisoned her father and stepfather and finally couldn't live with what she had done. From a purely instrumental standpoint, it was almost coherent. Ashley's death would close both murder cases. Investigators would have their perpetrator. Stacey would have her freedom. The fact that Ashley was her daughter, that this was the young woman who called Stacey her best friend, who drove to her mother's house and drank what she was handed without question, who was lying unconscious on a bedroom floor, while her mother sat beside her measuring out the next teaspoon. This appears to have registered with Stacey Castor as an inconvenience, not a moral weight. An inconvenience. That is not the psychology of someone experiencing moral conflict. That is the psychology of someone for whom other people are primarily instrumental, useful or threatening, assets or liabilities. There's a behavioral pattern across this entire case worth examining carefully. Stacey Castor never fled. She never attempted to disappear. She remained visibly present, calling 911, attending funerals, going to the hospital bedside, giving media interviews. This is counterintuitive to how we typically imagine killers behave. We expect distance, deflection, absence. But certain killers, particularly those operating in domestic contexts, killing people close to them for financial or situational benefit, maintain proximity because proximity is protective. The grieving widow is not a suspect. The mother who calls 911 is not a murderer. Stacey understood, even if not consciously, that staying close and performing grief made her less visible, not more. Every 911 call she made was a form of cover. Every sob at a funeral was evidence she could gesture to later. I was devastated. Look at how devastated I was. This performance held for 7 years across 2 deaths and fooled a lot of people. It nearly held through a third. After her conviction, she told ABC News, "I could never hurt them like that, ever. My kids were my life." She said it with apparent conviction. She maintained it to the end. The word antifreeze deserves its own analysis because it encapsulates something important about how these cases ultimately unravel. Stacey Castor was careful, methodical. She staged crime scenes. She managed witnesses. She controlled narratives. She was, in many respects, a competent criminal. But she was not operating from a stable psychological state when she wrote that fake suicide note. She was panicking. The investigation was closing in. She was managing a dying daughter in the next room, while simultaneously composing and revising a false confession on a home computer. trying to construct something convincing enough to redirect a homicide investigation. Under that pressure, her verbal tic surfaced in the written text, antifreeze. The same misspelling she had used aloud in her interview appeared repeatedly in the note, because when we write under acute stress, we write how we speak. We don't edit the way we do in calm moments. The authentic voice bleeds through. This is an important principle in the psychology of criminal self-betrayal. The greater the pressure, the more authentic the leak. Skilled criminals don't unravel in the first crime. They unravel when the machinery of cover-up starts generating its own demands. The more lies required to sustain the first lie, the more cognitive resources consumed, the more likely something slips through. Stacey Castor sustained her deception across 2 murders spanning 7 years. It was the attempt to manufacture a third, to solve the problem of investigation through another killing, that created conditions she couldn't cleanly control. She had too many variables. Ashley surviving was one. The misspelling was another. The computer metadata showing she had written 2 drafts of the same note while her daughter was at school was a third. Her plan wasn't careless, it was overextended, and overextension is where the mask always slips. One thread in this case remains officially unresolved, and it's worth addressing directly. In February 2002, Stacey's father, Jerry Daniels, was hospitalized with a minor lung complaint. Stacey visited him. On the documented day of her visit, she brought him an open can of soda. He died shortly after. He was cremated before investigators realized they might be dealing with a pattern. No toxicology was ever performed. DA Fitzpatrick confirmed in 2010 that his office had investigated the circumstances of Jerry Daniels' death. Michael Wallace's family pointed specifically to the open soda can as a potential delivery mechanism, the same method, perhaps, that Stacey used in the early stages of Michael's poisoning, before he became too sick to notice the taste. Stacey was the executor of her father's estate. No charges were filed. No evidence was recovered. The cremation ensured it could never be recovered. But the pattern is there: a dying relative, a visit, a financial benefit, and a woman who had already demonstrated she was willing to solve inconvenient relationships with poison. If the psychology holds, if Stacey Castor was someone for whom other people were fundamentally instrumental, Michael Wallace may not have been the first. He may have been the second. Stacey Castor went to trial on January 13, 2009, charged with 3 counts: second-degree murder of David Castor, attempted murder of her daughter, Ashley Wallace, and offering a false instrument for filing in the first degree, the forged will. Evidence relating to Michael Wallace's death was permitted as pattern evidence, though she was never charged in his killing. Her defense attorney, Charles Keller, pursued a bold strategy: blame Ashley. He argued that Ashley had killed both of her fathers, poisoning them with antifreeze out of resentment, and that her suicide attempt was genuine guilt. The defense positioned Stacey as a victim, a woman whose daughter had committed double murder and then tried to frame her own mother. Stacey took the stand in her own defense. She was calm. She was composed. She told the jury she could never harm her children. "I did not kill Michael Wallace. I did not kill David Castor. And I did not try to kill my daughter. Period. And I will never say that I did. Ever." Ashley also took the stand. She was the prosecution's first witness. She testified, tearfully, that she had not killed either man, that she had not written the suicide note, and that she had not tried to take her own life. She described drinking what her mother handed her and waking up in a hospital on dialysis. DA Fitzpatrick later described the moment. "I can't imagine my own flesh and blood is 50 feet away from me, saying that, 'You tried to kill me,' and not having a reaction to that." Stacey had no visible reaction. She sat still. She waited. In cross-examination, Fitzpatrick dismantled Stacey's testimony methodically. He played the wiretapped phone call where Stacey maneuvered Ashley into coming over for drinks after learning about the investigation. He walked through the computer evidence, 2 drafts of the suicide note, written from Stacey's home computer while Ashley was at school. He pointed to the turkey baster. He pointed to the fingerprints on the glass held from the bottom. And he pointed to the word antifreeze 4 times in the note. the same words Stacey had used aloud in their interview. Stacey Castor didn't make one big mistake, Fitzpatrick told the jury. She made a series of mistakes. Fitzpatrick also noted something else. The prosecution had used forensic linguistic analysis, examining who wrote the note based on vocabulary, phrasing, and error patterns, as part of their evidentiary argument. It was, he said, a forensic evidence prosecutor's dream. Computer evidence, DNA evidence, forensic linguists, wiretap recordings. She had left a trail across every medium. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On February 5, 2009, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 3 counts: second-degree murder of David Castor, attempted murder of Ashley Wallace, forgery of David's will. Stacey kept her eyes closed as the verdicts were read. She later told ABC News she hadn't looked around, had just sat and waited for it to be over. At sentencing on March 5, 2009, Ashley addressed her mother directly from the witness stand. She looked at the woman who had spent hours feeding her poison and said, "I never knew what hate was until now. As horrible as it makes me feel, this is goodbye, Mom. As hard as you tried, I survived." David Castor Jr. addressed the court too. "Your Honor, she is a monster and a threat to society. She has created so much pain and death, creating multiples of pain and death in the families of those she has hurt." Before sentencing Stacey to 25 years to life for David's murder, an additional 25 years for the attempt on Ashley, and 1 1/3 to 4 years for the false instrument charge, a total of 51 years and 4 months to life. Judge Joseph Fahey said, "In my 34 years in the criminal justice system as a lawyer and a judge, I have seen serial killers, contract killers, killers of every variety and stripe. But I have to say, Mrs. Castor, you are in a class all by yourself." Ashley Wallace survived. That fact is worth sitting with for a moment, because 17 minutes in the other direction and she doesn't. She recovered from emergency dialysis. She testified at trial. She stood at sentencing and spoke directly to the woman who had tried to kill her and frame her for 2 murders, and she did it with clarity and resolve. In the years that followed, Ashley had spoken publicly about what it means to have loved someone who was simultaneously trying to end your life. She told interviewers, "She was my best friend too, she was, and then she took that all away. And I would have done anything for her, but she decided she wanted to kill me instead." There is no neat psychological resolution to that. There is no framework that fully accounts for what it means to mourn the loss of a mother who tried to murder you. Ashley has had to carry both things at once, the grief and the survival, the love that was real and the betrayal that was also real. She is still here. That is nothing. That is everything. Stacey Castor died on June 11, 2016, in her cell at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in Westchester County. She was 48 years old. The cause of death was a heart attack. There was no evidence of foul play or suicide. Her earliest possible release date would have been June 2055. She would have been 87. She died without ever admitting to any of it. Her mother, Judy Eaton, still believes Ashley did it. This case sits at the intersection of 2 distinct failure modes, and that's what makes it worth sitting with. The first failure is systematic. Michael Wallace died in January 2000, a grown man with a healthy heart, dead on his couch, sick for weeks with symptoms that precisely match antifreeze poisoning, and no autopsy was performed because his wife said no, and a physician accepted the conclusion without pushback. Wallace's own sister flagged her doubts immediately. The system didn't listen. That first systematic failure gave Stacey Castor 5 more years. 5 years in which she married David Castor, built a new life on the proceeds of the first murder, and eventually repeated the method exactly. The second failure is psychological, and this is where the angle of this episode lands. When Stacey Castor's crimes began to be visible, when the investigation came and the walls started closing in, her response was not remorse, not flight, not confession. It was escalation. She attempted to solve the problem of being investigated for double murder by committing a third, more complex crime, by framing her own daughter, by manufacturing a false perpetrator from the person who trusted her most in the world. This pattern, escalating criminal behavior in response to the threat of exposure, is not unique to Stacey Castor. We see it in fraud cases that spiral into forgery, embezzlement that expands into extortion, abusers who graduate to murder when their control begins to slip. The original crime creates an ecosystem of cover-up, and that ecosystem generates its own imperatives. What makes this case illustrative is that Stacey's frame-up plan was, in its construction, almost coherent. She identified a plausible suspect with theoretical motive. She built a paper trail. She manufactured physical evidence in the form of a signed confession. She committed to the performance all the way to the hospital bedside. What she couldn't account for was her own habits of speech appearing in written text under acute pressure. Antifreeze. 7 years of careful deception, undone by 2 missing letters. There's a lesson in that beyond the crime itself. We don't unravel because we're careless at the beginning. We unravel because every layer of deception we add to protect the first one introduces new complexity, new variables, new opportunities for the authentic self to break through the constructed one. Stacey Castor could sustain a performance of grief. She could not sustain a performance of being Ashley under duress, writing about the substance she herself had administered to 2 men without her own voice bleeding through. The mask held until the moment she tried to wear 2 at once. Michael Wallace deserved an autopsy in January 2000. His sister knew something was wrong. She asked for one. The system said no. And David Castor paid for that systematic failure 5 years later with his life. David Castor Jr. spent years fighting to move his father's remains out of a cemetery plot owned by the woman who killed him, out of a grave marked "Together Forever" next to the man she killed before him. He finally won that fight in 2016, the same week Stacey Castor died. And Ashley Wallace survived by 17 minutes. She went on to face her mother in court, to look her in the eye from the witness stand, to stand at sentencing and say, "As hard as you tried, I survived." That matters. That always matters. If this episode made you think, if it made you uncomfortable in the right ways, I hope you'll take a moment to leave a rating or review wherever you listen. Reviews help more people find this show, and more people finding this show means we keep doing this work. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Be sure to tune in next week as we begin a chilling 2-part deep dive into Israel Keys, a killer who planned years ahead, buried his weapons across the country, and believed he could outsmart everyone. And if you want to go deeper, visit my website, link in the show notes, where you'll find my other shows. Carmen's Crypt for original horror fiction that will keep you up at night. Freaky Folklore, where we explore the supernatural legends and cryptids that define cultures around the world. And Destination Terror, where we investigate the haunted locations that refuse to let their story stay buried. I'm Carmen Carrion, and this is Deadly Intent, because the crime is never the whole story. The intent always is.